information about those timings, but basically 10 to 11, half-hour break. Tea, coffee, and biscuits will be served out there. You go and help yourself, do chat to people. Chat not just to those you come with, but somebody you don't know. Make sure that people aren't left out as we talk over the break. Then we'll come back for another hour. Then we have an hour's lunch break, 12:30 to 1:30. We don't provide lunch, but there are lots of places to get lunch just out there. So if you haven't brought lunch, you can go and find some. We gather back at 1:30, another hour, half-hour break, same thing again. And then a final hour, 3 till 4, and we try to wrap up by 4 o'clock. If you need toilets, they're down the corridor that way. And if there's a fire, go out the nearest fire exit. All the usual sensible things. Let me introduce our speaker for the day. Chris, it's great to have you with us. First of all, can you tell us what you do day to day at the moment? And then we'll go back to what you've done in the past that might make you a good person to speak to.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. 4 hours is quite a lot, and here you are with someone most of you have never met, and very grateful that you would give up your days to join us to think about this important topic. My name's Chris Howes. Day to day, I work at a place called Oak Hill College, which is like a Bible college, a training theology college or seminary, training men and women for gospel ministry and church leadership, both in the UK and worldwide. So that's up in North London. So we live there and work there. And my job title is Director of Cross-Cultural Training. So that is with a view to not only helping and supporting those who might be serving Jesus overseas in the future, but also actually all of our students, even those who are anticipating a UK-based ministry, increasingly in our diverse and multicultural society, all of our students need intercultural training and understanding of world church, global Christianity, ministry and mission with those of other faiths and cultures. And so my role is to help equip all of our students for modern ministry and the joys thereof. So we've been at Oak Hill for 10 months since January, 11 months maybe since January earlier this year.
And what were you doing before then that might have given you some insights into mission?
Yeah, so before then, we were 12 years in Uganda. So when I say we, I'll show you a picture in a moment, actually, but there's myself, there's Roz, my wife. She sends her love and greetings, and we've got 3 kids who are like, Josh just turned 15, and then we've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, boy, girl. And so... so we were in Uganda, that's right. So we were in Uganda for 12 years, 2011 to 2023. We were working at a Bible college in Uganda in a place called Namagongo on the outskirts of Kampala, the capital. And so that was similarly, in a way, training men and women for gospel leadership, mainly in Uganda, mainly Church of Uganda, so kind of Anglicans, but some other denominations as well, training people for church leadership across Uganda and across East Africa. And that was wonderful. And then we were also involved in sort of Sunday school ministry there. So Uganda's a very young country. Over half of Ugandans are under the age of 16, which is amazing when you think about it. Just kids everywhere. So it means that when you have a large church, you have a very large Sunday school. And so we had over 500 kids in our Sunday school. So Roz and I were kind of leaders of that, which at the time I used to whinge and whine about it relentlessly because it was incredibly hard work. And I look back now from the basis of this country, from the standpoint of the UK, and think, wow, what a privilege it was to have 500 or so young people just coming to hear about Jesus. And there's not many places in the UK where you get that, is there? So,
Brilliant. Let me pray, and
thank
then
you.
it'll be over to you. Father, we thank you. Thank you that you are at work around the world. Thank you that you call us to be involved in that. Thank you for Chris and his experience. And we pray that as he teaches, as we listen, we would learn more of what you are doing, how we can be involved, and that you would help us to engage well with your word and your mission today.
Amen. Oh, well, thank you again, everyone. It is such a delight to be with you, and I'm so honored to be able to spend these hours with you. I hope it is an enjoyable, informative, interesting, formational, even transformational day for us as we think about God's glorious global gospel purposes. That's what we're here for. I mentioned my family a moment ago, so that was taken earlier in the summer. Blue skies, it's very different to today. So that's myself and Roz and the three kids. Josh is in a school in London. He's doing GCSEs or Year 10. The other two are still homeschooling. We homeschooled in Uganda and are carrying on that with the younger two for the moment, but maybe that might change in the coming months or year or two. We were, as I said, we were in Uganda for 12 years. We were Crosslinks mission partners. You may have come across Crosslinks as a mission agency. So we were with them. And as I say, we were in a place called Uganda Martyrs Seminary. I'll talk a little bit more later on actually about why it's called Uganda Martyrs Seminary. It's a really important place and a really important story. Graham here has been there. I don't think anyone else. Has anyone else been to Namagongo? Oh, wonderful, fantastic, great. So yeah, a few of you have been, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. So we were there for 12 years. Before that, I was a student at Oak Hill, and before that, I was a geography teacher in a school in South London. But now at Oak Hill on faculty, and I've said what I need to say, really, Director of Cross-Cultural Training. I'll give a bit more info on Oak Hill at the very end of the day, if I may, just for 2 minutes. But it is a wonderful place to live and be. We're delighted to be there. And it's this big open grounds up in North London. And our kids who grew up in the kind of, barefoot running around Uganda. It's not quite as good as that, but it's as good as you're going to get in London. So we're thrilled to be there and having a great time there. Good. So the plan for today, Josh has said there's 4 sessions, 4 hours, and this is the loose plan. They might sort of overlap a bit. We might have to finish one in the next session. But in theory, these are the 4 sessions we will do. Mission in theology, rediscovering the heart of God, where we'll think a bit more sort of theologically, trying to sort of think what is mission, trying to define that. You may think that's a very clear and simple question, but actually as we dig a bit deeper, it's not. Sometimes it's more about putting in parameters rather than necessarily having an agreed upon definition that is watertight. People have tried for many centuries to do that and failed. So we'll be thinking around some of those issues. The second session, mission in the Bible, unpacking the biblical blueprint. So we'll have a think about what does it look like to understand the Bible sort of missionally, to understand how to read the Bible in a way that shows us God's mission purposes. And we'll have a look at one psalm to sort of unpack a little bit what that might look like and how we read the Bible missionally with kind of God's mission in mind and from and to God's mission. So that'll be our second session. The third one is mission in practice, so this will be after lunch, won't it? Cultivating the sending and supporting of mission partners. So these final 2 sessions after lunch are where it gets much more sort of practical, but I'm hesitant to try and to sort of say the morning is theoretical and the afternoon practical, because when it comes to mission, there's a thin line between theory and practice, and we want it to be that way. That's what makes mission. So, but I guess in a sense, in the afternoon, there is a sense in which we'll talk much more about the dynamics of cross-cultural ministry and mission in a local church setting. So that third one, sending and supporting mission partners in the kind of broadest sense of what that can and does and should look like. And then the final one, look at that, mission in the future, reimagining mission for the 21st century. That's a bold task for a 1-hour session later on in the afternoon, isn't it? But we'll have a coffee and we'll crack on with reimagining mission. The world is changing rapidly, and we need to really think carefully about what is contextual and perhaps even models from the past that are not relevant for today, and what is eternal and must be retained, but kind of placed into new forms and new modes and new ideas and new realities when it comes to global mission in the 21st century. So that's what we'll finish off with. So, it's 4 hours. I teach for about 100 hours of lectures at Oak Hill, and even that is probably about a tenth of what I would love to be able to equip Oak Hill students with. we've got 4 hours today instead of 500. There is a massive stuff that we'd want to say but can't, and topics it would want to cover that aren't going to be, and questions it could be answered but we may not reach, so on and so forth. But we will do what we can. There'll be time for question and answers as well. There's obviously discussions, time, break times and so on when I'll be around. So we'll do what we can, and we'll see where we end up. And I hope it will be informative for you. Everyone good? Got the plan? Everyone okay? Great. So, let's begin. In a sense, we're just beginning our first session, aren't we now? So, mission in theology. And I'm actually going to begin with a kind of a case study. I didn't write it, got it from a book, but it is perfectly sort of valid, and I think it's kind of made up, but it's, could be a true story in many cases, probably is a true story. But I'm going to need some volunteers. I know you've just come in. I know you're probably feeling like coming to the front and reading something is the last thing you want to do. But we're going to go through a case study of a conversation in a college canteen or a university cafeteria or whatever. So I think I need 4 volunteers. All it is to read a few sentences which are clearly highlighted in yellow for you. Ideally, a couple of males, a couple of females. Is there anyone who is ready to shake off either the cobwebs or the rain off your shoulders and come on up, yeah, come on up, you're welcome, thank you, please, you're warm. I think that's 3, that's 4, that's more than enough, thank you very much. So you'll basically just be reading the yellow. So if you're happy to take that one, please, if you're happy to take that one, if you're happy to take that one. Oh, and you're going to be Amber, which may take a bit of kind of reimagining, but hey, acting is acting, and we'll go with it. So Amber, thank you very much. I will be the narrator, so if you guys are just ready to jump in when it gets to the yellow, you've all got different parts highlighted in yellow. I hope this will work. So here is our scenario as we think through common perceptions of mission and global mission today. Since childhood, Amber had been fascinated by missionaries visiting her Sunday school. She had had the highest respect for them. Last summer, she participated in a mission trip to Jamaica. And just yesterday, she had discussed the possibility of long-term missionary service with her pastor. As she sat pondering in the cafeteria of State University, she suddenly said, almost in spite of herself, to her roommate Sheila, Sheila was stopped cold, fork in midair.
You can't be serious.
Though Sheila occasionally attended church, she found Amber's thought as strange as if she had announced that she would become a Martian.
Aren't there already enough Christians around the world? Why should you sacrifice everything you've worked for to go off to Africa or someplace? If you want to help, I think it would be better just to send money. Europeans aren't really liked very much around the world these days.
As Amber was attempting to answer Sheila's concerns, Paul joined them at the table and chimed into the conversation.
Missionary? Do you mean handing out blankets at a refugee camp or something?
Amber sheepishly attempted to explain.
Well, actually, I think I'm more interested in evangelism among teenagers. Trying to help them to get to know Jesus. And
You mean that you are actually going to try and convert people from their religion to become Christian?
Retorted Paul in disbelief.
What gives you the right to think that your religion is any better than theirs?
Paul's tone was noticeably irritated. Just as Amber was beginning to feel attacked and regretting that she had brought up the subject, a student sitting behind them leaned over and interjected.
You know that missionaries are culture destroyers. They have no respect for people's beliefs or customs. They do stupid things, like making the native women wear bras.
Though the others thought the comment a bit rude, they couldn't help but laugh out loud. Amber's shoulders were beginning to slump. The eavesdropper continued.
And by the way, if you would read history, you'd know that missionaries not only tried to civilize the poor savages, but they supported colonial governments. Some people believe that naive missionaries are being used by Western governments to undermine the traditional values of third world countries.
After a thoughtful pause, Sheila re-entered the conversation.
Sometimes I get the feeling that religion is at the root of a whole lot of human conflict in the world. Just look at Northern Ireland, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or Muslim terrorists. Weren't there riots recently in Indonesia between Christians and Muslims?
To which Paul added,
Yeah, and what about the genocide in Rwanda? They were supposed to be all Christians. See how much good that did.
in a desperate attempt to escape the embarrassment and shame, Amber changed the subject.
Did any of you see the football game last night?
But as if to hammer the last nail into the coffin, the eavesdropper interrupted again, saying out loud what everyone but Amber was thinking.
If you want to know what I think, mission work is downright arrogant and immoral.
Amber was so confused and upset, she quickly excused herself from the table and returned to her room. She had never heard such accusations against missionaries and assaults on mission work. Maybe missionaries weren't heroes after all. Maybe the days of foreign missions really were past. Oh, round of applause for these people. Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, it is, I think, a fictional conversation written from a book that emerged from the States. I adapted one or two things to slightly Europeanize it. But although that is a slight horror show of a conversation, and I hope that none of you have had or experienced such a thing, it may be that there are elements of that conversation that are familiar to you, things that you've seen in the media about sort of Christian mission or missionaries, things that people have said to you, things that maybe you've read in books or come across in other resources, and maybe conversations perhaps even that you've experienced in church or Christian settings in some way. There are a number of quite modern, in a sense, oppositions to the concepts and the history and the practice of global mission, by which at the moment we are referring to a slightly narrower sense of British churches sending out mission partners to other parts of the world. We'll explore that a bit more later. But if that is what is understood by Christian mission, there is a lot of opposition to that in the world today and in our society today. You heard one of our conversationalists there say, aren't there already enough Christians around the world? We'll look a bit more at that in our fourth session later on this afternoon. But in many ways, the remarkable growth of the church across the world over the past 50 to 100 years means that there is a sense of truth to that sentence, isn't there? That there are a lot of Christians, including places where the British church is still sending missionaries, such as Uganda. And I say that in full awareness of my history. One of these guys said, just send them money instead. I have some sympathy with that. Roz and I and the children were quite expensive to keep in Uganda. We tried to live in a very reasonable and sort of generous way, simplistic lifestyle and so on, simple lifestyle, but we were still quite expensive. And that money, there is an argument to say, well, couldn't we just send the money instead? Couldn't that achieve something more or better? Another argument that came across in that conversation, Westerners aren't very popular these days anyway. May just end up doing more hurt than good. You're not always welcome in many parts of the world. Another argument you may have heard in that conversation, what makes your religion better than theirs? You want to go and tell people about your religion? They've got their own religion. Why would they need yours? Another argument there, missionaries are culture destroyers. This is one very much in vogue at the moment, isn't it? That societies and places have distinct and individual cultures, and bringing Christianity and missionaries bringing Christianity is going to destroy those cultures, that they just run roughshod over them, that they impose Western values and Western cultures, and that is just unfair and improper. Missionaries support colonial governments. Missionaries in the past, perhaps even in the present, in kind of post-colonial dynamics, have been responsible for hurt and harm by working in conjunction with imperialist, aggressive, conquering governments or regimes in various different capacities at different times of history. Undoubtedly true. Religions just create war anyway. Various examples were given in the conversation. That maybe actually trying to make people more religious full stop is just a bad idea. And various examples were given, including Rwanda. And it closed, of course, it finished off with that sentence: mission work is downright arrogant and immoral. Mission work is just simply downright arrogant and immoral. I wonder if any of those arguments or oppositions particularly resonate with you. Are they things that you've heard in any conversations? What I want you to do, could you just spend no more than 30 seconds, could you turn to someone around you, if possible someone you haven't come with, but if it's someone you've come with or you know, there's no problem, we won't move around. Could you just share with a neighbor, have you heard any of those oppositions before? What did that look like? Do you feel any of those oppositions yourself? That's okay if you do. And have you experienced any different ones to the ones we've just talked about? So 30 to 60 seconds with a neighbor. Thank you. Okay, friends, sorry to butt into your conversations. No doubt we could. Sharing that you did that involved different points to some of the ones we've just discussed in that case study. Is there anyone that kind of had different oppositions that have been raised to the idea of global mission that we didn't discuss? Please, yeah. Right. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, too few Christians here. The needs are greater here. This is where you're most needed. Thank you. Why? Yeah, I mean, that might be related to there's loads of Christians over, there. This is where the need is. But yeah, that's very pertinent. Thank you. Any others that are kind of different to some of the ones we've looked at? Thank you. So you are inviting people into potentially very difficult or dangerous situations if they put their faith in Christ in certain parts of the world. And what is the kind of morality of doing that? Thank you. Yeah. My job this morning is not to sort of present an apologetic as in a kind of defense of Christian mission. We're not going to go through each of these things one by one and say, well, what about this? And, oh, well, these are the 3 points you need to make if someone says that. Firstly, because I don't think that's sort of very helpful. Secondly, because I think our first posture, rather than immediately be on the defensive, is to recognize that some of these criticisms are valid and real and true, at least kind of to an extent. There may be certain ways that we would like to respond to them, but I don't want us to sort of adopt a posture of sort of guns blazing, well, let me put you right. Actually, I think in all sorts of ways we need to recognize that both in the past and continuing to the present, there have been difficulties and problems with the manner and modes and systems and structures and paradigms of global mission that have meant that, sadly, devastatingly, unnecessary harm and hurt has been done in the name of Christ and continues to be done in some cases. And I think we want to acknowledge that and recognize that. And so my job is not to kind of give some sort of robust defense of global mission in that sense. However, nor am I sitting here saying, yeah, let's give up on the whole thing. Listen to these guys. Can you see what a nonsense this is? I'm sure you didn't come expecting me to say that. And indeed, that's not what we're going to be doing today. What I do want to do for the remainder of this session is actually sort of put in, we've only got like 20 to 25 minutes, put in some theological parameters that might help us grapple a little bit with what global mission is, what God's mission purposes are, in a sense that may not immediately sort of combat each of those oppositions in some sort of media-friendly soundbite, but rather enables us to be convinced and convicted by God's good mission purposes and a willingness to participate in them in his way, to his ends, in his goodness and with a spirit of his compassion, but in a way that I think does, in the long run, provide a sort of robust defense, in a sense, against some of these struggles that many of us are facing when it comes to the idea of global mission today. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so I guess, therefore, our question is, in a sense, mission, what is it? We use this word so much, don't we? The word mission. What is it? I mean, it's a common word, actually. It's a kind of very churchy word, in a sense. By the way, I should have said at the beginning, I don't have handouts for today, as you've probably gathered. What we do have is a massive PowerPoint that's just going to run throughout the whole day. And I'll happily provide that for you. I'm sure there's ways we can do that, at the end of the day. So the PowerPoint will be available to you. Please, obviously, do take any notes or whatever if you'd like to. But if you're just listening and just soaking in, that's absolutely fine. So, what is it? Mission, what is it? It's a very churchy word in the sense that you don't have to hang around evangelical churches for too long before you hear the M words of them used. But it's actually a word that is very common outside of the church as well, the word mission. And particularly in a sort of business setting, you will often hear businesses and organizations talk about what is their mission, a sort of a culture, a values, a purpose for being. What's our mission statement? So many companies are very, very clear on what their mission is. Have a guess. Whose mission is this? Which company? To offer a wide range of well-designed, functional home furnishing products at prices so low that as many people as possible will be able to afford them. Which company? How did you guess? Absolutely. To bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Either Nike or Nike. This one's harder. Accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. No, good guess. No, another good guess. Another good guess, but wrong. Oh, I've got you. That's good. After two easy ones. It's Tesla. Interesting, isn't it? To empower every person and every... What was that? Tesla, the Elon Musk's car company. Yeah. To empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. It's quite a mission statement, isn't it? Do you want to know who's that? You might disagree whether they're meeting this target, but it is Microsoft, There's a few shakes of the head there. That's Microsoft, the computing company, who do like Windows and all of that. And last example, to entertain, inspire, and inform people around the globe through the power of unparalleled storytelling. Who tells good stories? Yeah, Disney. Yeah. So a lot of these companies and organizations have very clear kind of missions or mission statements, and it is kind of, above the door, so to speak, and so forth. So I guess it begs, let me go back from that. It begs the question, as we asked a moment ago, what is the church's mission? What is the mission of the church? Can we sort of summarize it and agree upon it in one simple statement like we've just done with those companies? Well, I reckon we're not going to do this, but I reckon if we gave you each a piece of paper and got you to write down in a sentence what you would summarize as the mission of the church, we would get 40 whatever, 50 whatever different answers. So, and that's even from within, I would guess, I don't want to assume anything, but I guess that many of us would sort of refer to ourselves as evangelicals. Some might not, but I'm sure many do. So, 50 different answers from a group that is probably, broadly speaking, that congregates around a certain part of the church. Imagine the broader church across this country, across all denominations and perspectives, and imagine the church worldwide, 2 billion Christians and 2 billion different answers. And so there's a sense, isn't there, in which there is not a clear mission statement of the church. And we just want to then wrestle a little bit with, why is that, or what does that mean? What are the implications of that? Well, there's one author who wrote this book, an American guy, J.D. Payne. He wrote Apostolic Imagination, a book that came out a couple of years ago. And at the start, he says this. He says, the language of mission is unclear. Is missions found in passing out gospel tracts in China or overseeing food distribution in Nicaragua? Is missions fulfilled by church planting in Iraq or constructing a building for a church in Russia? Does missions include all of these examples or none or others as well? The identity of missions is unclear, he says. Is every Christian a missionary or only those who relocate their lives to a remote location overseas? Are doctors and teachers actually missionaries, even if they do not share the gospel verbally, or are evangelists the only missionaries? The purpose and priority of missionaries is unclear. Do missionaries go to serve people with great physical needs? If so, what is the difference between missionaries and NGO workers? Do missionaries go and share the gospel and do nothing related to social justice? Is priority given to evangelism or meeting social needs? Or is there no priority, but rather multiple priorities related to the individuals who go and not the church as a whole? Practices are unclear. What are missionaries to do on the field? Are they to be involved in church planting activities? Are they to be involved in relief and development? Are they to be involved in training leaders, caring for the environment, freeing those captive to human traffickers, alleviating poverty? And finally, locations are unclear. Should the church spend most of their offering money at home or abroad? Should people be sent to reached or unreached areas of the world? Or are all locations equal? How should pastors lead church members to reach the nations? People are making inquiries about the church in the West. Is the West a mission field? And he could have gone on and on and on. You get the idea that in many ways, mission, we might say global mission, is a kind of phrase that many of us kind of bandy about quite liberally and with a sort of broad sense of knowing what it involves. And yet when you don't have to dig too far to realize that there are all sorts of ambiguities and questions and lack of clarity about what exactly we mean by mission. I live in the world of mission. That's kind of my job, my vocation, my hobby, my love, my passion. And, this is probably 1/100th of the mission books that have come out in the past 5 years alone. And 10 or 20 more come out every month. There's this huge kind of industry, and yet so little agreed upon. To the extent that one scholar, David Bosch, says this: mission remains indefinable. The most we can hope for is to formulate some approximations of what mission is all about. So that's one perspective. You may agree or disagree. The one perspective is that we simply can't define it. The best we can do is some sort of vague approximation, And that's all we can do. Every church in every age, in every setting will kind of work out as best it can its own understanding of God's mission. But there isn't really any further clarity or agreement than the church over time or over space can make. That would be one perspective. Another perspective from my colleague at Oak Hill, a visiting lecturer, Keith Ferdinando, he wrote this. He says, he complained about David Bosch's comment a moment ago and said, this sort of definitional ambiguity ultimately obscures the absolute centrality of the vital task of making disciples of Jesus Christ. So he would disagree with Bosch, and he would say that actually the more you kind of float around with, well, you can't define it, it depends who you are and when you are and where you are and, you know, sort of your paradigm and your readings of the scriptures and your context. And, you know, he would say, no. Making disciples of Jesus, you know, don't move away from that. Keep that laser-like focus, and that's what mission is. And of course, many evangelicals would agree with Keith here. But many Christians around the world would disagree. They'd say that that is too narrow a perspective, that it doesn't encompass the sort of breadth of God's mission. And so you may sort of think, gosh, we're half an hour into this first talk and we're still just kind of asking questions and floating around. And in a sense, yeah, you're right. That is what we're doing. And time is relentlessly, horrendously marching on. But I kind of do want to get that point across, that there is a lot of debate and disagreement. There is ambiguity over what global mission is. And so providing some theological parameters and guardrails is probably the way to go as best we can. And we're going to begin, therefore, with, or begin to do that, I should say, with this question here. Well, what does the Bible say about mission or world missions? What does the Bible say about it? And if I'm being really cheeky and sort of really technical about it, the answer to that question is nothing. The answer technically is nothing. Now, let me be a little bit careful here, because you might be thinking, who is this guy that is coming in to speak to us? We are onto a loser here. But let me just clarify. What I mean by that, and I'm being a bit cheeky, obviously, by giving this answer. What I mean is that the word mission is not a Bible word. Okay, so if you want to do a strict kind of concordance check of, right, well, let's look up every verse that is about mission, that you're not going to get very far at all, because the word mission isn't there. And I guess you might have come across the sort of thing that the word Trinity, for example, isn't there. So we do sometimes get this. But let's think about this word mission. So where does this word mission come from? Why do we use it so much in the church if it's not a Bible word? Well, we need to be a little bit careful. When we say it's not a Bible word, what do we mean? We're going to get a tiny bit technical here. Don't panic. We're not going to be like this the whole day, but switch on your kind of brains quite to kind of high level, because we're just going to get a little bit technical for a few minutes. The word mission is an English word, but it derives from a Latin word, okay? So that middle one there, mittere, is a Latin word, and it means to send. So the root, or what we call the etymology, the kind of word meaning of the word mission, is sending. It's a word that has kind of sending connotations with it when you dive into the origins of that word. So straight away, we want to play around with this word, sending. The Latin word mittere, Latin is not a biblical language in the sense that the Bible is not written in Latin. But Latin was obviously a language around at the New Testament times, or soon after particularly. And the Bible was translated into Latin pretty early on. And those translators into Latin made the decision that there's two Greek words that they will translate into mittere. Those two Greek words are apostello and propempo. Now, I'm not asking anyone to understand Greek or know Greek to do this. Don't panic. But this is important. So there are two Greek words in the Bible, in the New Testament, that are used regularly. In fact, apostello 131 times, pempo or propempo 79 times. So regular words in the New Testament, and almost on every occasion, that is translated into Latin using the word mittere, to send, and that is where we get our word mission from, okay? So you can trace that word mission back to the scriptures. You won't find the word mission in our English translations, but you will find propempo and apostello in the original New Testament Greek, and that's where we want to dig into if we're trying to understand a kind of biblical framework for mission, okay? So where do we see apostello and propempo, the word send? Well, I've given 7 examples here, okay, 7 verses where you will find the words in Greek, apostello or propempo. Obviously, we're doing it in English, and so this is the English translation. And I've underlined each time where you find the word sent. Can you just turn to your neighbor, spend 2 minutes, go through as many as you can, just go quickly one by one, and just say for each verse, who sends and who is sent? For each verse. Go move really fast. Who sends and who is sent? Turn to your neighbor. Last few seconds. Who's okay? We are racing, aren't we? Don't worry if you didn't get through them all. So there's 7 verses up there that use the words, the Greek words, apostello or propempo, send, which is where we get our word mission from. So remember, we're trying to dig deeper into what mission is. And so these are the verses we're targeting because this is the kind of root of our English word mission. How many did you get through? Shout out, what number did you get to? 7? Most of you got through most of them? Okay, fine. Who sends in these verses? There's not one answer, obviously, but who sends? Just work it. The Father, right. So, we'll come on to who is sent in a minute, but who does the sending? Some of them is the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, the church, Paul. Perhaps that's sort of similar, the church and or Paul might be a bit similar. For example, in number 6. Okay, so God the Father sends, God the Son. Okay, good. Who is sent? Sorry, say that again, someone here. Jesus, God the Son. Jesus is sent. Paul and Barnabas are sent. Timothy is sent. Preachers in general, the 3rd one up there, isn't it, Romans? Yeah. People with beautiful feet. How are your feet? Thank you. I don't think we've got a verse up there, but there would be other verses I could have put up that referring to the sending of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. So we've got this sense that sending, which remember, I keep saying it, is where our word mission comes from. Sending is both a divine and a human activity, in that God sends and the church, stroke Paul sends. And that those sent, it is also divine and human, in that there is sending going on within the Trinity. So Father sends a Son, Son sends a Spirit, Father sends a Spirit. There is a sending relationship within the Trinity. But that also humans are sent, the church is sent. Do any of those verses refer to God the Father sending? It depends a bit how you interpret number 3, I guess. But we've certainly got the Son sending the church or Christians in number 7, haven't we? And have we got the Spirit sending? We do, don't we, in number 5 in Acts 13. So Father, Son, and Spirit sending the church. And to some extent, the church sending the church as well, so to speak, other parts of the church. Okay, so we've got this kind of ecosystem of sending going on. Now, we're getting quite deep, aren't we? If you're thinking, gosh, this is heavy for a Wednesday morning, that's fine. Stay with us for the minute. Where are we? We've come to this kind of point. The word mission is not directly a biblical word, but it derives through the Latin from 2 Greek words meaning to send. This means that the concept of sending is central, just etymologically in terms of the root of the word, is central to any definition of mission. More specifically, the sending is done primarily by God, Father, Son, and Spirit, I perhaps should have added, and primarily in reference to the Father sending the Son and the Spirit, and subsequently the Father and Son and Spirit sending Christians into the world to participate in their divine work. That's what we're kind of building. Now, whole books, whole theses are written on this kind of sense of the intra-Trinitarian sending and how that impacts the church. I know that we are racing at 5,000 kilometers an hour here, but I want you to get that overview of where the word mission comes from and what the idea of sending is in the Bible. And so in a sense, we've got this idea that mission is both a divine activity and a human response. It is a divine activity because God, Father, Son, and Spirit sends. Father sends Son, Father sends Spirit, Son sends the Spirit, Father, Son, and Spirit send the church. It is a sending divine activity. But sending is also a human response or a human activity, both in sending ourselves as a church. You know, Paul sent Timothy, or the church in Antioch sent Paul, that kind of idea. But it's also a human response that we are sent ones. We are both sent and senders, which is true of both the Son and the Spirit. Theological words, this kind of ecosystem of sending, that we follow a God who sends and is sent, and as we partake in him, as we join in him, in union with him through Christ by faith, that we are also sent and sending. Now, what you don't want to do is divorce the idea of sent and sending from one another, either in the Godhead or in the church. I know this is heavy. Stay with me. You're only a few minutes from the break, right? So keep going. You're okay. One way that this could go to an extreme and become problematic. Well, what happens if you? Sorry, where are we? What happens if we go to the extreme where we say mission? God sends and only God sends. It is God sends and God is sent, and that's all that mission is. There's no human response or human sentness or human sending. It is just a God thing. Now, you can take that to an extreme, and that used to happen. So the 19th, sort of late 18th, early 19th century missionary William Carey, you may have come across, when he first shared his vision to travel to India to sort of, as a missionary, so to speak. He famously stood up in a church meeting, and an elder gentleman stood up and said to him, "Young man, sit down. If God wants to convert the heathen," remember this is 1792, "if God wants to convert the heathen, he will do so without your help or mine." So that would be taking the divine aspects of sending and excluding any human participation or human response and saying God sends, God's the missionary, mission is a divine activity, the Father sends the Son and the Father send the Spirit, and that's how mission takes place. We have nothing to do with it. Now, I hope you'd probably agree that scripturally and theologically and in practice, that would be an extreme end of the spectrum that is not healthy or correct. The other kind of extreme, this sort of human response idea, is to detach mission from God at all and to say, well, actually, mission is a human idea. It's a human response. It's a human plan. We've come up with this. We've developed our plans, our strategies. We don't really need God. I mean, no one really says this, but they act like it. We don't really need God in all this. We've got this sorted. We've got our 5-year strategic vision, and this is what we're going to do, and this is our invention because we need a bit of a bigger church and a bit more money in the church, and we just want to grow because we're American. So I didn't say that. Because that's what we do. And so let's just keep going. And so that would be, and almost without reference to God. Now, I want to be a bit careful because no one is quite like that, clearly. But I tell you, you read some stuff and you listen to some stuff and it doesn't feel a million miles from that. The kind of almost excluding the divine aspect of mission and God sending and just focusing on the human response and the human activity. Both of those are quite extremes then, aren't they? That we just want to be careful with. And so where do we sort of land when we then think about a theology of mission? Where do we land? Well, I think we land, with this phrase. It's a bit poncy and a bit theological, don't panic. Missio Dei. Okay, it's Latin for the mission of God. Now, you might say, well, I use the Latin, why not just use the English? Yeah, because, you know, this is what we do. So Missio Dei, the mission of God. The mission of God, that is a sort of concept that tries to sort of formulate a structure, a theology, a paradigm, if you will, that correctly balances that ecosystem of sending in the Godhead and in the church, that says that God's mission, it sort of emanates from him, that he is, in a sense, you might agree with this, or you might want to use this language, or you might not, but God is a missionary God, that there is a senseness and a sendingness in his very being, one of his attributes, and therefore, as people made in his image and people joined with him by faith through Christ, we are a sent and sending people, that there is something inherent to us in that is not a human invention, sort of aside from God, but nor is it simply a sort of a God's task that has nothing to do with us, but rather we are invited into God's mission purposes. And so a couple of quotes, it might just help land that a bit, back to David Bosch, who we met earlier, who says this: mission is not primarily an activity of the church, primarily, but firstly, maybe, an attribute of God. God is a missionary God. So that's this kind of Missio Dei paradigm. Another quote here, this is from, who's that? That's Timothy Tennant, isn't it? So, an American missiologist, he says this: mission is far more about God and who he is than about us and what we do. So again, it's trying to ensure within this kind of Missio Dei paradigm that the mission of God, it begins with God, that we see it as his character, his attributes for all eternity as the sending within the Godhead and sentness, and that it begins with him, that whatever we do is a response, it is downstream. We are invited in, but it is downstream from who God is. This dude here, that's me. I don't usually kind of elevate myself amongst these illustrious missiologists. Well, I do. I clearly do, because I've done it now. Missio Dei, this guy says, Missio Dei recenters missiological emphasis away from human structures, schemes, and strategies onto God's purposes, plans, and perspectives. I was so proud of that double alliteration that I just had to include that. But you kind of get the idea. So this Missio Dei paradigm is trying to kind of entrench mission into, have God and God's character and God's nature as the foundation of our mission. Now, some of you, and we need to stop for a break, some of you might be sitting there thinking, duh, this is so obvious. I don't get why I've come here to just get what I already knew. That's great. If you're thinking that, in a sense, that's great. Thoughts, how often we can veer away from this Missio Dei paradigm that centers mission on the plans and purposes of God and participates in what he is doing in the world. Very often, our language and our kind of pattern of mission can be falling off the tightrope to one extreme or another, either underemphasizing human participation in it or emphasizing human participation in it. And instead, we just need to recognize our participation as derivative, as downstream from who God is and what he is doing in the world and inviting us into. Now, we're going to need to break in a minute. There is actually, I was hoping to do a little bit more on this first session, Theology of Mission. And so what we're going to do is carry it on after the break. So in a way, the first session will continue. And that's fine. I thought that might might happen, we'll cut into the second session. That's no problem. But I guess the point is that we're not done with this idea of Missio Dei and building a theology of mission that enables us to better kind of think through mission and a theological groundwork for mission. We're not done yet, but we do need to break. Just before we break, and I'm happy to take questions for 5 minutes, but just before that, so we've said Missio Dei, the kind of sense of God's missionary nature. That feeds down into ecclesiology. We'll come on to this later. That the church, therefore, has a kind of missionary nature, and that even theology as a discipline, as a science, and as a kind of practice of knowing God and being known by Him, has a missionary foundation to it. Now, this idea is key. It is not that mission is therefore kind of sidelined, a little niche kind of hobby of a few keeners in the congregation who did a gap year many years ago, but rather actually it is something much more embedded into the very heart and values and vision and passion of God, and that if we want to share His heart, vision, values, and passion, that we will also be those who are mission-minded, that are missionary. I'm not saying everyone must be missionary, that is both sent and sending, and we'll dig a bit deeper into that in due course. Gosh, that was some heavy stuff, wasn't it? Is everyone all right? Could you just poke your neighbor and check that they are still in good shape? Well done. As I say, we're going to carry on after the break. Any kind of questions for the moment? We've got a few minutes if we need it. So any questions on what we've done so far, mindful that we're not done? Please.
Absolutely loved what you said. So,
Oh, gosh. Oh, I love that. Just stop there. That's fine. Thank you. Anything else? No, sorry, go on.
and showing us how the Bible uses those words and links it so with God. Just wondering if the Bible uses those words in any other context.
Thank you.
And maybe does that leave us with two different.
Thank you. You're so right to say that, because actually I could have pulled a fast one on you here very easily, because I told you there was hundreds and whatever uses of this word propempo and apostello in the Bible, in the New Testament, and then I showed you 7. Now that you're good, because that is open to manipulation, isn't it? It really is. I don't think I am. You can do a sort of more thorough word study. There are examples where that word is used in very kind of what's the word? Kind of casual ways, yeah. So, yeah, exactly, yeah, that sort of thing. The prodigal son is sent to go and feed the pigs by the guy, whatever. So, yeah, you get the sort of casual uses of it, and that's fine. And that doesn't undermine the way that word is also most commonly and fundamentally applied to the Godhead and the church in relationship to God the Trinity. But that's a really perceptive question. Thank you so much.
Does that mean we can use the word in like Mission Impossible? Use it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
There's this other kind of idea of what mission is, so linked to God.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So we can't control. I forgot about Mission Impossible. That's another way that we see this word mission, isn't it? Tom Cruise. I think, yeah. I mean, clearly we're not able to own any word in the English language, and nor should we. I guess that we have a particular, the word mission. When we use it as Christians, we could just use it in a Mission Impossible way, or the mission of Nike. You're free to use that word anyhow. But there is clearly a technical way that we Christians and we in the church often employ that word. Your preacher here will stand up and say, we need to think about mission in this country today. And clearly there's a kind of connotation of that. There's a connotation of sentness, of goingness. That derives from this sort of idea. So yeah, we're not at liberty to own any word, but there's a way that we employ that word in a technical manner that I think, yeah. Thank you so much. Very quickly, anyone else? Everyone wants a coffee, or everyone is utterly bemused and confused. Either way, after the break, we will crack on and land this in a really clear way, I promise you. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your break. See you in 11:30. Hello, you're welcome. Thank you, Sydney. How are you?